Cool. Thanks, Kai. All right. FYI, we were supposed to discuss today the rollout of the in-product survey for merge requests, but Stanislav isn't able to join, so I moved that point to tomorrow's weekly sync, which is in the agenda above UX sync agenda points. So we'll discuss that tomorrow. But I wanted to discuss the validation efforts for the restructured MRs. And this is part of the KR that we have to this quarter to create 5 issues, which is a very round number, but yeah, 5 issues that are in planning breakdown phase that we can then have engineers take a look and implement in the next quarter. But yeah, validate and create 5 issues to start implementing. And I haven't recorded yet, but tomorrow I will record a walkthrough of the mid-fidelity mockups that I've been designing that explain what we've been working on, what are the ideas that we've explored, and how do they contrast with what we have today. And I also link there to a comment in this issue, so which is the research issue. It's confidential, but I mean, it's okay for us to post this recording publicly. There's nothing confidential in what I'm showing. But yeah, validates 2 design concepts for the 3rd hypotheses to structure MRs. And I laid down some thoughts on what we could validate or not right now. And it's a lot of things and a lot of questions. And but there are basically 5 main things. So new comments tab, a minimal activity log in the overview tab, a new reports tab for code quality, security, and other reports. Today, those are merge request widgets. Remove commits tab in favor of a commit picker and changes tab, and remove the pipelines tab in favor of pipeline summary, and so on. Yeah. So the good news is that this point I might have been able to add this to another KR that we have in the UX department, which is to build a business case to invest in something like this that would have a single place in the code review experience for people to review the outputs of CI reports, artifacts, and all of that. And I talked with Andy Volpe today, staff product designer from Secure, and he's working on that KR, and maybe they will be able to take this on and design and further validate this idea of a reports tab. And so the focus that I think we should have is the new comments tab and this minimal activity log in the overview tab. And so that would look something like this. So these are mid-fidelity mockups that as I said, will share more in depth tomorrow in a video walkthrough that I will record. But essentially, we have a new comments tab here at the top. We have that reports tab that I was just talking about. And we've gone away with the commits and the pipelines tab. And below in the activity feed, it will become a very minimal activity log where everything is in chronological order, nothing is threaded, and you just see things coming in as events from most recent to the oldest. And when you click on something here in the activity feed, maybe like something that Tina Smith approved and she left 5 comments, you could click here or go to the comments tab and you would see a dedicated view for the comments. And I think this is the most impactful thing or idea of all of the ideas that we have explored, the most impactful one that we could work on. And if we could deliver this as a small yet significant improvement, I think it will make everyone's life better when reviewing. But the question I have is about how we should research this. If we should research all of the concepts together. So the fact that we're removing the commits tab and the pipelines tab and adding this reports tab and adding the comments tab, or if we can focus solely on adding this comments tab and this minimal activity log, because the two are so related that I feel like if we just add this new comments tab and validate that, it could be confusing if we still have the threaded comments below and the ability for you to add comments here as well. It will feel very duplicated, maybe from a iteration standpoint, like the order in which we ship things. If the first thing we ship is just the comments tab with like all of the comments here, that might work, but long term it might be confusing if we still keep the activity log as is. So I would like to see us validating the comments tab and the activity in its more minimal form first. And yeah, the question is whether, as I said, if we validate this idea with all of the other ideas. And my question here is particularly related to the existing commits tab. So as you see, this is something I just put here, like a comments tab. If we were to add the comments tab, but not remove the commits tab, I wonder if it could be confusing since both terms are very similar looking, and you just go in and might not even notice that we have a new comments tab, which is something that we can also validate, right? We can also always have a prototype that keeps the commits tab here and see if it raises confusion. And if we need to remove the commits tab first before introducing the comments tab, or if we can add the comments tab while we'll still have the commits tab. Yeah. Does any of this make sense?
I was just going to say, I don't know if we have, I know we don't have enough room for 5 tabs. So I think we're going to have to always stick with 4 or less when we start, the unresolved threads component. And then when you resize the screen, things start stacking pretty quickly. So plus, if you translate it into German, then,
Exactly. Yeah. So the good news is that all of the unresolved, like in this case, well, I picked the best merge request. It doesn't have any unresolved, but the unresolved navigation here, unresolved threads. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Another great MR. But yeah, all of this would go into the comments tab because you would be able to filter and jump between threads here. So I think we can solve that in the comments tab and would give us all of this space here at the top to work with whatever we wanted. But yeah, you're right that, I mean, having more tabs, it's not good.
Just to be clear, your question currently is how do we research this, not like what are your opinions on these ideas, right? I want to make sure I don't give, okay. I don't want to give feedback if you don't want feedback. Okay, then I think that's a question for Ben. So
I mean, I think we can, yeah, as I said, tomorrow I'll be recording that walkthrough, and I think that can give more context into the ideas, and nothing is set in stone. But I do feel that from what will be presented, the strongest one that we could pursue in code review in our group, because there are, this idea of the reports tab and even removing the pipelines tab and just having, links to previous pipelines here in this widget in the status of the overview. These are things that I feel we can hopefully delegate to other groups and have them do that validation and design work in parallel. But for us in code review, I feel like the strongest idea we can pursue right now is having a comments tab, and at the same time trying to redesign the activity so that it's more minimal, easy to read, and doesn't have as much clutter. But as I said, I'm unsure if we need to validate, if we can validate in a vacuum the comments tab addition, or if we also need to factor in the removal of the commits tab, or other things as part of this.
My suggestion would be to give as fleshed out of an idea like as you can, and see if people can draw the connections that you want them to make. So if you're not planning on having the commits tab and the comments tab exist at the same time together, don't show anybody that. If they ask, hey, what happened to the commits tab? We can probe and see like, hey, well, where would you expect to find that information now? Or things like that. And yeah, that's basically, does that answer your question? Sort of?
In part.
Okay.
Because the challenge here is we can certainly design and flesh out the ideal end state where we would like to end up, but we also have to see if the way we iterate and ship things makes sense. So imagine that removing the commits tab and putting that information elsewhere is a lot of work, and we can't deliver that at the same time of the comments tab. Will it be confusing that we have two tabs, commits and comments, at the same time with very similar names? And as I said, that's something that we can try to test as well. But so basically, my question is, should we validate the iterations, or should we validate the ideal end state, or should we validate both?
Ideally, we validate everything, but in the interest of like time and sanity, I don't know how much effort we want to put into validating the iterations. I guess it depends on sort of the time that each iteration is going to have to stick with people, right? If it's going to be 6 months that they're going to have to live with two very similarly named tabs next to each other.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I can tell you that some people will get confused initially. People will work it out.
Yeah.
It's like something that we deal with all the time. So, I mean, it's not ideal, but
Yeah. I think what you just said, I think it makes sense to validate both, especially knowing that for a lot of self-managed instances, we have a very long lead time until people upgrade their instances. It may happen that for many instances, they just see both tabs, comments and commits at the same time for, I don't know, like 9 months until they upgrade again to a new version. So I think we always have to balance that and understand that whatever we ship, if it is on by default, if it's not like behind a feature flag or anything, if it's on by default, some instances and many users will be stuck, so to speak, with that for a long time.
Is there a reason we can't build this behind a feature flag similar to the navigation redesign that we did a few years ago? That way no one will be stuck with these less than ideal iterations.
Yeah, sure. I think we can do that. I'm not seeing a reason why we can't, since we can confine this, just like at the project level or group level, and it's not like it's adding new functionality. It's basically, yeah, just rearranging things, and so I think we can do that.
Sorry, yeah, and I meant also letting users opt in that same way, where there was like an alpha available and people could start using it.
Yeah, that's also a good idea. At this point, I don't have a strong opinion on whether we should have a like a preference or a beta program for this, but definitely a feature flag. Yeah, I think this warrants a feature flag because it's a critical change, or it couldn't be a critical change. And I think, Ben, what you were saying of like testing both the ideal, like the end state, and the in between. I think what you just said, I mean, we could have a prototype more fleshed out, of course. Like this is just mid fidelity. There's a lot of things missing here, but we could test both this view where you just have these tabs, and we can also test another one where we add like we just duplicate this tab and have a commits tab next to it. And yeah, and just see how users respond to that. And if they try to click the commits tab, for example, or if they're confused by two similarly worded tabs. So I think it shouldn't add a lot of overheads to the validation efforts. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean that makes sense to me. I think if that's really something we're gonna have to live with as an iteration, sure. I mean, I've tested things like this. I'll tell you that like some percentage of people will click on the wrong thing. It will be better than that if they're not semantically similar. But like, as long as the content is fairly different, it's not like a critical. It's unlikely to be a critical path error.
Right.
So yeah, I guess I would just say, let's be thoughtful about the iterations that we put out, given that people might be stuck with them for a long time, and try to make them as congruent as possible, or as whatever you want to call it, livable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think testing the end state is a good way to make sure that we're heading in the right direction. If people can't understand where we're going, that is definitely something we should address before we start iterating to get there. So
yeah. The other angle we can test this is if we think that the commits tab can be problematic if it is placed at the same time as the comments tab, if they're next to each other, we may want to focus our validation efforts first on what we're going to do with the commits tab once we remove it, which in this case, the idea is to move the information of commits to the changes tab and perhaps placing it above the file tree, and you can navigate commits here and select which ones you want to see and blah, blah, blah. So that's the other possible angle is, okay, instead of first validating the comments tab, let's focus first on the commits and solve that and remove the commits tab, and then work on the comments tab. But as I said, I think I'm just thinking out loud here. I think adding the comments tab has much more value than removing the commits tab. So I'm inclined to focus our validation efforts first on the comments tab, even if it means having a variation of a prototype with a duplicate tab, just like for for commits just to see how people respond to it and if they're confused. And then based on that feedback, we can then say, oh, actually we can't add the comments tab with the commits tab at the same time. Maybe we need to first validate the removal of the commits tab and work on this part first. Yeah, and just thinking out loud.
I think that makes sense. Deliver the biggest chunk of value you can first.
Yeah. All right.
Pedro,
All right.
do you think, just like out of curiosity, do you think you can validate the comments tab without telling people what happens in the changes tab? Only because as a like user of GitLab, I immediately now have questions about where comments are when I see this. And so I'm wondering, like, how do you, because comments today exist in two places in GitLab. This feels like you're going to make them exist in one place, but it's not like clear. And I think
Yeah,
that
I
so I'm just
think
wondering how to do that.
yeah. That's a great question. Yeah, we will still have the comments in the changes tab, and maybe that's something I need to add in here is some indication of comments on lines and even findings like security vulnerabilities and code quality findings. That's something I'm still thinking we should keep here, because you may approach your work in a merge request from a diff first angle and not so much from a comments or reviews angle. So that's why we have these tabs. And also for reports, like the reports is if you're approaching this from a findings perspective, like you want to make sure your code is compliant with your organization's policies. So you go to the reports and you fix everything there. But if you're just looking at the changes, of course, you'll stumble upon the comments here. And you can still make comments in the changes. Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think it's something to think about. I think the other thing to think about, and just since I've now opened the can of worms and like feedback here, is like a tighter collaboration. Not that it hasn't happened, but between you and Annabelle on this concept and the review rounds concept, because I'd like to see like how does what Annabelle's been thinking about there fit into this, and you sort of just said something about like, well, maybe you approach it from a diss first versus a review piece. And I think if we are serious about like review rounds being the merge request concept we want, like I feel like that should be how we think about maybe what this restructuring looks like too, is that like the only way we support reviews is via review rounds, right? Like maybe we should, I'd be happier taking maybe a more opinionated stance than sort of like coming away from here with like comments in two tabs. I think if we come out of like all of this work and we still have comments in two tabs, I think that's sort of a mess up on our part.
Yeah, I thought a lot about that. Yeah, so the first part, yeah, Annabelle and I are in sync about this, and even though she's exploring the review rounds and leading that effort, I'm kind of hinting at that here, but this is all like an exploration. Like for example, like you can see here these indicators on the left side, and they're kind of like hint at maybe something that is new or unread, or but it doesn't mean we're going to do this. It is just to give this a more realistic look of how it could work, and more sophisticated look. It doesn't mean that we're actually going to build all of this functionality here. Even the filters, we might not have that. In terms of having the comments in separate places, I think we will have to live with that. We will always need to show, unless we're very opinionated and we say, no, you see the diffs and we don't show you any of the comments on the diffs. Like if you want to see comments, you have to go to the comments tab. Unless we say that, I think we need to keep showing the comments here and also in the comments tab. But the way you approach it is differently. For example, as a reviewer, if I'm looking at the merge request for the first time and I jump to see the changes, I want to leave comments here. I don't want to go to a comments tab to somehow create comments and say which line and file I'm commenting on. I want to interact with the diffs and leave the comments here. But if I'm an author, or if I'm coming back to re-review the merge request, maybe I go to the comments tab and respond to reviewers here or to the authors and have this conversation here before going to the changes tab and seeing what's new and which new files I need to review. So I think it's different angles yeah, just different ways of focusing on what you're working on at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm nervous to end up with comments on 2 tabs at some point in the future. Like, I would love to get to 1. So maybe it's just something we can keep in mind. I think there's options there, but I'm happy to let this play. I like the idea of a comments tab, but I'm curious like how that meshes with the concept of like a review round, right? Where that was sort of like a version of the MR at this state existed. Here is the feedback on the version of the MR at this state. Now there's a new round, and here's the code at this version of the MR and the feedback on this version of the MR. Like, sort of like how do we get those things aligned versus like, I think this sort of still ends on the very like ephemeral sort of, the merge request changes tab is always the latest version and comments may or may not exist there at all. And like, it's hard to tie like the review round to the changes tab at any point in time. Like, you have to sort of only use the comments tab to deal with feedback versus like thinking about those things as like states and events and versions. And unlike the version of versions that we have today, which is just like every time you push it randomly creates a version, like a more like concrete version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We can talk about it more. I want to make sure that we don't end up with this and then like try and wedge review rounds into it if review rounds is something that we think like makes sense, because I think there's a disconnect right now between these two things.
Yeah, I don't know. I think so. One of the ideas that Annabelle had for review rounds is making those rounds explicit in the activity log and having all of the comments that you made as part of a review together and able to filter and just see like everything that person, resolved and commented on and which threads they created. And I still think that is here, right? We can still do that. That's not a problem. What you're talking about of creating versions of a merge request, like the author saying like, this is version 1, 2, 3, and 4, and starting and stopping people's reviews according to those versions. That is I think that's a different, related but different concept from what Annabelle is exploring, unless I'm mistaken. Does that make sense, Annabelle? Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah. Yes, it is. It is separate. It is. I think that they do work well together, the current review rounds, general concepts, and this. As far as versions from the author's point of view, is something I haven't really thought about too much, but I think I agree with you. I'll need to look into that some more.
Yeah. It's almost like saying, like the author. So the versions idea is the author saying, stop all reviews. This is in draft. And then here's another version, resume reviews. and then receive feedback, stop reviews, work, here's another version, request reviews from everyone, so it's like a start stop kind of thing where the author ships versions and you see a different version of the MR every time they go through that, which I think is tricky because you might have reviewers reviewing at different moments. Like you might have a backend review and you do backend changes, and you're waiting on front end. So I think the versions idea works really well if it's like a one author and one reviewer, or if it's a very simple thing where you just have one, like you're not leaving things open, like you're resolving everything and now you have a new version where everything is in theory addressed. But I find it hard to imagine how that can work when you have multiple streams of reviews that are not completely parallel. But yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if I've gone in a slightly different direction where you're not really getting reviews on versions, but if, let's say, you ask a front end person for a review, they come back with all these comments, it's all batched together in that little activity object. You make some changes and then you re-request a review. I was thinking their review comments would then again be batched together. So in that one review, it could compare that, like that front end person might have 3 reviews with 3 versions of that merge request, and then you would see them all in different states. I don't know if that's what we want to do, but I think that's kind of what I was going with. I'll have to look at that more.
Okay. All right. Yeah, my concerns about the validation are answered, and I will comment in that issue. I left a long comment there 6 days ago for you, Ben, and Annabelle. Don't feel like you have to respond to that comment now. Tomorrow, I will add a summary of what we've discussed here, which I think will provide more direction for what we need to do in terms of validation. So thanks for your input. And Kai, about the just feedback. I know you can't help yourself giving feedback on these things, but just a general feedback. As I said, tomorrow I will record the walkthrough of those mockups, mid-fidelity mockups, and share it. And yeah, open to feedback as well. And I can try also to share the designs in an issue if you want to have like specific comments about certain things. But yeah, I will ping you on that.
Thanks.
Yeah,
thanks.
Do we have time?
Yeah.
Just the smidgen, or I just specifically need Kai, I guess, to answer a few questions about code owners. In my review rounds, I'm trying to, create those placeholders like, hey, this merge request needs front end, back end, blah, 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 based on approval rules and code owners. Is our code owner file just not very well written, or is there no way to fix this? Like front end shows up 3 times on many merge requests. Documentation shows it many times. I see that we have sections defined, but those sections often include the exact same people, or they're named the exact same way. Is it just us? Are there any other customizations that we can do with code owners? Can GitLab like make their own code owner changes, or is this something that we're using out of the box?
So, and you're specifically talking about like the GitLab project shows up like with weird code owner rules multiple times, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's because of the way we wrote the code owners file.
Why?
It's a good question. It wasn't anything that like, I think if we could do it again, this would not be the code owners file that people would use. But it is how people have written it today. And so the idea is that a path, a section should only show up once asking for approval, and it'll be everything within that section that matches a rule, and all the people that can approve it. So like if you've got one that has something different, yeah, so each of those are section names, even if it's the same people that can approve. Or they should be section names.
Front end is the section name, or it should be the section name.
Yeah. Although,
Yeah, in this case, I wonder if they could have written this with a wildcards so that it would match both EE and without the EE folder. But I think
And
the take,
assets.
yeah,
dude, that's actually showing up. That's weird. It's actually showing up as 3 separate approvals required, even though it is all under one section. That wasn't
that's the
my
thing with sections, is that you can't assume that they are about the same thing and have the same people, even though they have the same name. Yeah, unless we do some very smart deduplication and analyze both the name and the people that are eligible approvers, they will show up as separate entries.
What I
yeah.
would expect to happen is to put front end as the section name, and then I would expect to put the front end group or users, and then I would expect to put the paths. And then if this merge request touches any of those, it would show up one time and it would say front end.
Yeah.
And it would maybe list all the paths if you need to, but I don't even know if that's necessary.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that would make it much more easy to consume and also write those code owners sections. But today, that's not how it works. Unfortunately, we just piggybacked on the code owners existing
I
structure.
thought it's squashed inside of a section.
No. Because that's the thing, we can't assume that they have the same people unless it was written as Annabelle is suggesting. So this is like they have front end, this is a front end section, and we type out path and who's the approver, path, who's the approver. And what Annabelle was suggesting was section, we would list the eligible approvers first, so only this, and then below all the file paths, right?
Yeah, I understand what you're suggesting. I thought we squashed inside of the section, but I guess rereading the docs, that doesn't actually sound right. This sounds like we still match paths first, which is how code owners works. It matches paths. The sections are really just there to be like it. And in fact, the sections seem like they're there so that you could give a path to 2 different groups to approve easily. Exactly. It's not so that you can squash and control. It's so that you can have 2 different people approve the same thing.
Yeah. We would have to change or extend the syntax to allow you to do that, because even in this section of front end, you could have, I don't know, for front end integration, for example, we could have another group or other people maintaining the front end integration and still under the front end section.
And I would call it front end integration and put them in their own section. But I guess I'm just missing the point of the way this is laid out. But regardless, then is it a GitLab specific, the way we have it laid out? I mean, our code owners file is huge. My designs where I'm trying to use those code owner rules isn't working because I have to label front end 4 times. Is that GitLab specific, or is it something I need to even think about? Or
it would potentially be probably like any group could run into that, right? Like where they would actually, you could have a front end section and you could have different groups inside of that front end section.
Yeah.
Right. So that might, it is a problem, but it's fixable. As in, if you do see that this design gets implemented, you see all the front end duplicated, then you say, okay, I need to change my code owners file. And we could do that, right?
But you wouldn't change. No, I don't think there's a path to change the code owners file with the way the syntax works today to make it so you don't see all 4 of those.
You could make a new section for integrations or like front end spec. I mean, it would still be the same group. Okay. So this is not going to work. Great.
Yeah, it's problematic. As I said, I think the easiest way, because this makes sense the way it is today, but because we don't have smart deduplication to basically merge this entry, and this entry because they have the same people. So we would have to possibly extend the syntax to do what you were suggesting, Annabelle, to below front end say who are the eligible approvers, and then below we would list only the paths, but the first line below the section would be the eligible approvers for all of the paths below, and that would allow you to merge everything and avoid this duplication. So you just have front end app assets here, then EE spec front end, then spec front end. That's what you would want.
I love that it's like a feature change though. Like that, the way you're thinking about it, Annabelle, makes way more sense and was the way I sort of thought sections worked. So it would also like allow people, I know the other thing people want is like multiple approvals in a section. So like that's another syntax extension that needs to happen.
Yeah, so I messed this up, but it would be
like
you could do it in brackets
front end 2 or something.
You could do like brackets for everything for like the main stuff. And there's all kinds of ways we could lay it out, but like, yeah, we should open a feature issue. Although I don't think the source code group has any time to take on code owner stuff.
Yeah. So it would be something like this. So yeah, who is eligible approver, and then the paths below. Like forget these ones here, and this would allow you to have, you would have allow you to.
As someone who doesn't know much about code owners before looking into it this much, this layout in its current look is so very confusing. And the fact that it keeps appearing multiple times, they're not even all, there's like merge requests in the middle of it. It's just so very confusing. And I don't know. I think it needs to be fixed in some way. The priority, well, whatever. Hopefully I'll get rid of all of this and we'll stick it in a dropdown and it'll be great.
Yeah. So this is what you wanted, right? This would make much more sense, but that would only be possible with a syntax like this, not like this, which allows you to specify different approvers per path, unless we do some smart deduplication.
And that's why I was wondering if it's like, if we're already doing anything specific for GitLab and the GitLab product for code owners, or if we're just using code owners off the shelf.
Yeah, we're using it correctly, so to speak. We're using it as much as it is possible to use correctly.
Okay. Yep. Well, we'll open an issue for that and see.
The great question.
It could be done.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Annabelle, and thanks, Pedro. It was great to see everyone and catch up. Annabelle, I tagged you in like a comment. I don't know if you've seen something that I sent you before, but worth potentially looking at as you think about review rounds. Cool.
Okay. Did you ping me on it today?
I just sent it to you. I added it as an agenda item and pinged you on the agenda.
Okay. So, great.
All right.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone. Have a good one, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.